Hello everyone, I am Dr. Shruti Mathur from Sri Venkateshwara College. Welcome to the session on data table in Excel. In this session, we will do what if analysis with the help of data table as a tool. We will be using data table for one input variable as well as two input variables. Dear friends, we discussed the concept and utility of data table in one of our earlier sessions on what if analysis. Let us briefly revise. We said that data table is used to analyze the impact of changes in value of the input variables on the output. A data table allows the users to examine a range of possible outcomes for different input values and combinations. Data table can be used to see the impact of change in a maximum of two input variables at a time. Not more than two, only one variable or two variables at the maximum at a time. So data table allows us to see what will happen to the output if I change one or two of the variables at the same time. Let us understand more with the help of an example. Now here I have a data set whereby I am given the quarterly sales of a company. I am also given that the profit margin of the company is 15% on sales. So I can calculate my net quarterly sales by multiplying the quarterly sales with the profit margin. That will help me also in calculating the profit before tax, which is nothing but the sum of all the quarterly profits. Then I can calculate profit after tax, which is profit before tax multiplied by 1 minus the tax rate. In our case, tax rate is 30%. The question says that we should use data table to analyze the impact of change of profit margin on profit after tax for the company, assuming different profit margins. So you can see over here that one of the variables, that means the profit margin, is being changed, and the company wants to analyze how a change in profit margin will lead to a change in profit after tax, and it is going to observe this for 10% margin, 15%, 20% and 25%. So let us go to, so one input variable is being changed. Let us go to our Excel sheet and see how data table will be used in this case. Before we start with the data table, let us calculate the net profit. So like I told you, net profit is nothing but sales into profit margin. So I will click the cell for Q1 where the sales are entered, that is B4, and multiply it with the profit margin that I am given. I will convert this profit margin into an absolute reference by pressing cell F4, because I will be copying the same formula down the column. Now copying this down the column for all the quarters, I get the quarterly sales. Then I calculate profit before tax, which is equal to the sum of all these quarterly sales. So I am using a sum function, giving the sum range as the syntax and clicking enter. This gives me the profit before tax for the whole year. Next I calculate the profit after tax. The profit after tax will be equal to the profit before tax multiplied by 1 minus the rate of tax, which in my case is 30%. So I have clicked on the cell containing the cell references and pressed enter to get what my profit after tax is. Coming back to our question, I have been asked to see the impact of change, observe the impact of different profit margins on the profit after tax. So what are the two variables that are in consideration? My outcome is profit after tax. I am interested in finding what will be the profit after tax. And what is the input variable that I am changing? I am observing the change in the value of the profit margin. So this box in blue, my profit margin, this is the value that I am changing. Now to use data table, the first thing that you need to do is you need to write all the possible input variable values that you want to use. So in our case, the question says use the profit margin of 10%, 15%, 20% and 25%. So I have written these values in the cells. The next step is that I have to observe where my output variable will be displayed. So if I want to have profit after tax, then where will this profit after tax be indicated? It will be indicated in the cells immediately below the row where I have entered the profit margin. So in these cells, if my profit margin is entered between H4 to K4, then my outcome or the profit after tax will be calculated in H5 to K5. Now the next thing that I do is I enter my current output calculation cell in the cell which is just to the left of this entire expected output matrix. I am saying that this is where I want my outcomes to appear. So just in the cell to the left of this range, that means this cell which I have shaded as gray, this cell G5 is where I will give reference of the cell where currently my output is calculated. So I will just give the reference of, this is my output cell, I will give the reference of this cell. Press enter. I will repeat what I said. When I have entered all my possible input values for profit margin, the output will be displayed just below these in the row next to it. So to the left of this range where I am expecting to calculate my output, I will, in the cell immediately to its left, I will give reference of the cell which currently contains my output, the formula for calculating the output. This is the cell where my formula for containing the calculating the profit after tax is mentioned. I will give reference to this cell. Now I will select this entire cell range containing the different input variable values that I want and the current cell reference to the output cell and the places where I want my output to be displayed, profit after tax based on the new profit margins to be displayed. So this entire range of G4 to K5, this range I have selected. Now I will press the data tab and I will go to what if analysis drop down list. From here I am going to select data table. As soon as I do that, this data table dialog box appears and you can see it is showing me two parameters. One is the row input cell and the second is column input cell. Now in case of only one variable being used, I will be using either the row input cell or the column input cell. Which one will I use? I will use a row input cell if I have put all my values of the variable in a row. Just like in my case, I have put them in a row. So I will be putting my values over here in the row input cell. I could have alternatively also entered these values down a column. In that case, I would have used column input cell. So row input cell is what I will be using. Now what does row input cell mean? Row input cell is that cell which corresponds to these values in the original calculation table. So originally, what are these values? 0.1, 0.15, 0.2, 0.25. These are all profit margins. In my original table, which cell contains the profit margin? This cell B2. So these values of 0.1, 0.15, 0.2 and 0.25, these correspond to B2 in the original table. And now I click on OK. You can see that all these cells are now filled with the profits after tax. You can also see that the current 0.15 margin is showing this profit, which is the same as this one. So this is how we use data tables with one variable data. Let us come to our second part, whereby I am going to change two input variables. So earlier only profit margins I was changing. Now I will see the impact of change in various tax rates also. Say tax rate is varying between 10% and 40%. And I want to see what will be my profit after tax if say my profit margin is 10% and the tax is 40%, or my profit margin is 15% and tax rate is 20%. So all the permutation combinations of profit margin and tax rates, what will be my profit after tax for each of these combinations is what I am going to do. Let us come to my next table. Now again here I have the same table. I have already made the calculation for net profit and profit after tax as I did earlier. I have also written my profit margins as before in a row, and I have also written my possible tax rate now in a column. And since I am making this in a table form, the cell which is to the left of all of these values, or which is at the top of all the rates, this is where I am going to put my current output cell reference. So here I will enter the reference to this cell which I want to be calculated. I want the profit after tax to be calculated in the entire scenario. So I am going to put the reference of this cell which contains the formula for calculating the profit after tax. So C9 I put in this cell, and again I will just select this entire matrix. These are the cells where my output for the various combinations will be displayed. Go to data, go to what if analysis drop down list, data table. Now in the row input cell, I will enter what have I given in the row over here, profit margins. So where is my profit margin in the original table? B2. I will just click on B2, B2 appears. Now I will also give the column input cell. Column input cell refers to what do the column values represent. Now these column values, they are representing the various tax rates. They correspond to this cell D2 in the original table. So I will give reference to D2 in the column input cell and click on OK. You can see that the various profit after tax for each of the combinations has been calculated. The highlighted one is the current one that I have highlighted for your reference. So if say the tax rate is 40% and the profit margin is 25, then this is the profit after tax. If they are 10%, this is, so various combinations I can see using data table. So this is how data tables are useful in understanding at a glance how my output will change in case the inputs are changed. But it is only used for a maximum of 2 variables. Thank you.